Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds. In today's video topic, we will go over my Abyssal Echoes Fire Crit Devotion Smite Paladin, a fun build for those who want to roleplay as a holy caster. Before we get into the video, I would suggest liking the video if you're enjoying the content, as that's the best way to let YouTube know I am doing a good job. We're also going to do a new thing here on the channel. I'm going to ask a question each video as I want to get to know my viewers more and to let you guys know more about me as well. Question of the video today is going to be, what is your favorite food? Mine is homemade pizza, as baking one is one of my favorite hobbies. Rolling out the dough by hand is definitely one of the most satisfying things I've done in life. So for this build, I just wanted to try to make Devotion Paladin function well. Normally, you would just self-cast your smite and the clear would be absolutely terrible. Now, one of the solutions to that would be to utilize triggered smite and suck up your mana otherwise and do it that way, but I wanted to make self-cast smite actually feel good for clear and single target. Now, the problem here is if we try to add a different way to clear, it usually doesn't scale well with the same things that the Smite Devotion scales with, i.e. lots of mana that needs to be empty. Thankfully, they reworked Abyssal Echoes this patch, and it has a node that allows you to turn the attribute scaling into 2 flat fire spell damage per attunement, which then of course also gives us 2 flat mana and 4% increased damage per attunement for our smite. Abyssal Echoes is also very adept at deleting our mana bar, which is important for getting damage with our Devotion Smite, as you can remove the cooldown, allowing you to spam it all around and sucking up all your mana at will. Abyssal Echoes also functions as our clear, as we grab the node that turns off the chain, but makes it pulse in the same spot for a few seconds. These pulses also heal us inside the AoE, and as you can tell from the footage, it literally makes me able to face tank most bosses in the game on a mediocre 2k HP pool and sustains us through monoliths. Smite, of course, with the devotion scaling is very strong, getting us up to 40k crits on most empowered bosses, absolutely sickening. One neat trick I found, if you use all your mana with Abyssal Echoes, then use your Smite a little, as you'll gain a little bit of mana because I have Smite on mana on Smite use, and Reversal, it will keep your mana close to 0. As you will remember when you're near 0 mana in the last 2 seconds, as that's how Reversal works, allowing you to stay in the max damage range for longer. This combo plus Smite gained on mana use allows you to manipulate your mana enough while doing monolith or single target situations, and allows you to never have an awkward feeling like you're out of mana for Abyssal Echoes, or an awkward feeling of always being at full mana with Devotion. We then run a one-handed dagger and a shield for maximum base crit and chunk. We could also run something like a Bastion of Honor if you don't want to invest heavily into block, but you still want to be tanky. You can also run a rune dagger for your one hand, as the flat we get from attunement stacking alone makes up for the low 40 flat adaptive spell damage the rune dagger has, making the base crit it has just a plus. It also is made up by the fact that we have so much adaptive spell damage while holding a shield. Right now, Abyssal Echoes is just at 60% crit, while my Smite is at 100% chance to crit, which I found to be good enough for most situations in pretty much the barrier for endgame. You could also run an offhand catalyst with base crit, but I found that you're super squishy and not using block on Paladin feels very weird. With all that being said, let's get into the video, shall we? Here we are in game with the build. This is Abyssal Echoes Smite Paladin. So pretty much the idea is we want to suck up all our mana, and then we want to spam Smite and do a lot of damage, right? That's pretty much the plan. The Abyssal Echoes does about half of our single target damage, and Smite does the other half, which is very strong. Like I said, you can kind of use Abyssal Echoes to like heal yourself and also do a lot of damage, which is really nice. It's like doing 20k per, and there's like 10 of them going off, which is really nice. Just being able to place it down and leave it down and it heals you is really, really strong. Let's get into skills. So for Abyssal Echoes, we take 2 points travel into Deep Expanse, although having more AoE would be nice. 1 point into Vorpal Explosion. This removes the chain, meaning that it will no longer. So, for instance, Abyssal Echoes at base will cast around you and then chain to enemies, but we remove that functionality so we can grab Screaming Rifts. Abyssal Echoes now creates an Abyssal Rift at the target location that casts Abyssal Echoes for you 3 times at its location before expiring. So that's what this is, right? It just keeps casting Abyssal Echoes for you. Pretty much just makes your Abyssal Echoes echo, quote unquote, and then we get the 2 additional casts, making it 5 additional casts. So every single time I cast Abyssal Echoes, it will hit 6 times, which is really strong, turns out. Then we take 1 point travel into Fiery Chasm, although this does open up the ability to play an Ignite version of this build eventually, which is really cool. 1 point into Potent Corruption. This turns off the Abyssal Decay. So normally Abyssal Echoes will deal like it will deal like like kind of like an ailment, kind of like Time Rot, and usually it's very strong, but we're turning it off so it does damage on hit instead. Then 1 point into Void Purifier. So this makes us so into fire damage. And then, of course, we get healing from damage nodes. So, for instance, this one node here gives us 80% more healing instead of applying the Abyssal Echoes, which is really cool. There's a lot of like cool stuff because of that. It's really strong, and the healing is very strong as well. And it doing fire damage allows us to do the same damage as our smite. And then, of course, we grab Heavenly Gift. So the Vitality and Attunement scaling, what does that mean? Well, if we hold Alt over Abyssal Echoes, you see that 90 fire spell damage. That normally would be Vitality to get that much damage, but we're utilizing Attunement so that it actually adds mana. Because if you did not know, Attunement gives us 2 mana per, and it also gives us 4% healing effectiveness and 4% increased damage per thing. So we get a lot of increased damage just by stacking Attunement to make our Abyssal Echoes do damage, right? So that's very strong. And this heal is busted, like absolutely busted. Like you were seeing me in the clip, I could just place a bunch of them down. It's every single time it like flashes, which is really strong. Like the interaction between Screaming Rifts and Heavenly Gift is like like almost broken, almost. If Abyssal Echoes actually did enough damage to deal single target, like you wouldn't even need Smite technically. Now, of course, we take 1 point travel into Vorpal Reverberation, 2 points travel into Rippling Corrosion, although the armor shred stacks are really nice for your smite, as if you have like 10 Abyssal Echoes on the target and they all hit a bunch of times, they all shred armor, it's actually really strong. Then, of course, armor shred effects. So you can get a lot of armor shed with Abyssal Echoes with this setup because you can just put a bunch of them on a target and you just get so many hits there. You see that? It's like ridiculous. So yeah, you could very easily invest into armor shred with this version. Then 1 point into time compression so that we remove the cooldown. Normally it comes with a cooldown, but we're removing it. But it adds a flat mana cost. So it starts at 30, then goes up to 45. But then we grab all this mana efficiency so that it costs less, because that just means more Abyssal Echoes before we run out of mana, right? And it also makes clear a little bit easier. Yeah, that's pretty much it for Abyssal Echoes. Then for Smite, this is your stereotypical Smite setup, but we're going to go over it real quick. 3 points travel into Holy Fire, 4 points into Conflagration for hit damage versus ignited enemies, 3 points into Pillars of Light, so we get the double cast sometimes, as you can tell. This double cast is intelligent, meaning that if you have 2 enemies, it will hit both enemies instead of just one enemy, and then if there's only one enemy, it'll only hit the one enemy. So pretty much this is just a 36% more damage modifier for all your damage because you're just hitting more often. 5 points into Sacrifice. So the healing from Abyssal Echoes is insanely strong, as I'll show you as I lose some health with Sacrifice. Literally like instantly back up to full health. So that's how we actually mitigate the Sacrifice damage. We also take 3 points into Atonement, but I don't think we actually need this many because you could mess around with these points. And then, of course, 2 points into Conviction for the base crit. It does reduce our cast speed by 10%, but it allows us to 100% crit with a Smite when all of our stuff is up, thanks to the Rune Dagger, pretty much, and if you have better gear than what I have right now. Then for Sigil, stereotypical Sigil setup, we just went for the fire damage instead. Pretty much the same thing here. Same thing with Volatile Reversal. It's the same setup, just don't run the dot nodes. You just run the hit nodes, and that's it. Pretty much just run as much cooldown as possible, so you can just spam the cooldown and all that. Get the cast speed, attack speed. It's the same thing. Now our holy aura tree is a little different. So we take 2 points travel into Rise Devotion, 5 points into Burning Blows. All of our damage is global fire damage, so this really helps. 2 points into Fire Penetration. This is insanely strong on bosses, and it doubles when you press Holy Aura, meaning you get 20% pen, which is really strong. Then 2 points travel into Vital Boon, then 4 points into Redemption. So this healing is affected by healing effectiveness, and Smite heals you as well, by the way. So like not only are you healing from your Abyssal Echoes, you're also healing from your Smite. So you're constantly healing up your damage that you're taking, which is really, really strong. And that's pretty much it for the skills. For the passives here, we take 8 points into Fearless as we want the Vitality, 1 point travel to Gladiator just for some extra block chance, 5 points to Armorclad as the way we do single target damage is we spam Abyssal Echoes on single target and then spam Smite. We want to sit right next to the boss because we want to be inside of our Abyssal Echoes, and we want the Abyssal Echoes to hit the boss for the armor shred, the fire shred, for the damage, for the healing. So you definitely want this DR. 1 point travel to Valiant Charge, 5 points into Time and Faith. So a lot of builds that are running Devotion right now will try to run a 0 mana cost Smite so that you don't actually gain mana with your Smite. But the reason why we actually gain mana with our Smite, and why I have a mana gained when I directly cast Smite Helmet, the main reason why I do this is while you're clearing, you're not using your Smite. Like when you're in Monoliths, you're just placing down your Abyssal Echoes. Now, normally, you can usually use Reversal to like make up for your mana loss from this, because you gotta remember, this doesn't benefit from you having negative mana. So you want to be as much mana as possible while you're clearing, right? And then of course, nuke single targets with Smite. Smite doesn't need the Devotion benefit to nuke rares and monoliths. It just needs it for bosses and in the Monolith of Fate, like the big bosses, right? In Orbis. So sometimes you'll have to spend a lot of mana, and if you fuck up, as I'll show you, 1, 2, 3, 4, we don't get any mana back. And how do we cast our Abyssal Echoes if we have no mana regen? Well, thankfully, Smite actually gives us a lot of mana for how much it costs. Like, it gives us a shit ton of mana, which is how we actually gain our mana back. And how we utilize this rotation on a boss that I can show you here. So we cast our Sigils, cast our Holy Aura, spam our Abyssal Echoes. Then instead of immediately reversaling, then we cast Smite. As you can tell, we're getting mana, but then I reversal back down to less mana. Then by the time that happens, you're out of Abyssal Echoes because they only echo for 6 times, and then you can go back to casting Smite on the target, which is our kind of our rotation for bossing, and that's like about a 6-second rotation, and it's pretty strong as it gives us a lot of damage and a lot of sustain at the same time. And while you're clearing, like I said, you only need to use Abyssal Echoes and use a Smite every so often to kill a rare. So like that's how you do that. Now, 1 point into Steel Aegis for the extra block chance, 10 points into Abyssal Endurance for the res and the HP, 1 point into Void Corruption for the 11% crit multi here, as we want as much crit multi as possible to make our smites hit as hard as possible. 8 points into Conviction for the increased damage while also getting the Fire Pen, really, really strong. 8 points in Defiance, we want as much attunement as possible, and it gives us free Ellie res, so that's really strong. 1 point travel to Honor for block chance. And of course, 10 points into Heaven Fire, this gives us 30 flat. I'm not entirely sold by this, but it does give us a lot of flat. It's like pretty much an attunement per point, pretty much quote unquote, like in the same amount of scaling. 1 point travel to Holy Symbol because my gear is kind of scuffed and I'm using it to cap my necrotic res, which I need another point in it now. As you can tell, my gear is never good in these videos. I like to show you guys what builds look like without gear, just so you guys understand that like you don't need insane gear to be pushing Monolith, right? And of course, 1 point travel into Sanctuary Guardian, 1 point into Shield Wall, 1 point into travel into Faith Armor, then 10 points into Precision. Since we're not lightning, we don't get the crit multi, but we get the crit chance, which is fine. Sadly, we can't turn Abyssal Echoes into lightning. If we could, we would, but we can't. So that's why we keep both things fire so that all of our scaling works at the same time. Then we take 12 points into Reverence of Duality for the increased mana, which is good for our devotion, increased healing effectiveness, which is good for our devotion and our smite and our Abyssal Echoes, increased damage, increased health. Then, of course, I'm taking 12 points into Light of Rye. The main reason I'm doing this is just for movement speed because you kind of need some movement speed, and we can't run something like Argentus, so I'd rather just be able to move fast, right, through the mono. That's pretty much why I'm running that. That's like the only reason. You just want some movement speed, and when you're making as many builds as I am, you definitely want movement speed. Otherwise, things take forever. Oh, I forgot dedication as well. 10 points for attunement and mana regen. Really, really strong. And that's pretty much it for the passives. For the rest of the passives, it's like two plus I think one from Majasa. Like for three passives, like I don't necessarily know what you would grab. Maybe points into prayer ages, probably actually. Yeah, you'd find a way to fill this up. Take 1 point out of holy symbol and fill this up. As that's a lot of EHP just from one node. You could like take some nodes out of some other stuff and do that. Maybe take nodes out of Heaven Fire if you can and run into prayer ages, as that's a lot of and it also gives us healing when we heal from our endurance threshold up, right? Which is really cool. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the passives. Now for the gearing, my idols are pretty much solved. You just run 4 Smite idols with fire damage. This is pretty much exactly what you want. This idol right here, this is like literally exactly what you want, just better rolls, obviously, because you can get up to 30%. But like this is pretty perfect. It's pretty much exactly what you want. You want 4 of those. Everything else is like whatever. Then, of course, for the idols, I'm running crit chance idols with HP or resistance. It's your flavor. You can use whatever. I usually use either resistance or resistance to like, cap my reses, as you want to be capped on reses, obviously, so you don't die. Then required unique for the build. You require devotion to do your single target. So I can show you what the single target looks like without devotion here in a second. So we're doing like 200k crits, and now without devotion, we're doing 20k crits, 80k crits, 90, 100k crits. So it's kind of like double our damage. So I wouldn't say it's necessary, but it's more like you should probably farm it. And where to farm it? The Age of Winter has unique amulets and relics. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to Monolith of Fate, going to go to Age of Winter. You're going to choose Empowered Monoliths, as it'll give you more of these. And in this timeline, Echoes can have rewards that grant unique or set rings or amulets. And if you look here, they'll have echo rewards that'll give you unique or set amulets. There aren't that many amulets in the game, so you'll eventually get devotion, and devotion is not that rare of a drop. I have a lot of devotions, and this is my perfect one. So yeah. Mainly the way this works is when we're missing mana, we gain a bunch of cast speed and damage, which is really strong. It's on a really good amulet base, being on the gold amulet base, as it's a lot of resistance. The healing effectiveness helps us, but the lightning damage and the lightning pen does not help us, which is okay. Doesn't make or break the build. The main reason we're still fire, like I said, is because this scaling becomes spell fire and not spell lightning. If it was spell lightning, we would actually just run lightning Abyssal Echoes and be fine and run lightning smite, but sadly we can't. And for the helmet, this is pretty much perfect. This is pretty much perfect. The mana gained on smite is really nice for utility. It's pretty much perfect rune dagger. You'd want chill and slow, of course. For the chest, this is almost perfect. You would want HP flat instead of that physical resistance. Of course, you want it on the critical avoidance base. You want as much attunement as possible. Maybe turn that vitality into attunement. Now I think about it. Then this shield, I'm just running exalted healing effect, and this is just a really good shield I managed to drop. You could use almost any shield with block chance healing effectiveness, or you could use a Bastion of Honor if you want to for extra DR. Like, it doesn't really matter with this. The shield just helps you cap your resistances, and it's really nice for healing effectiveness. Then for the rings, I'm trying to transition into double movement speed rings. As you can tell, I'm failing with that, but a ring like this is very strong, as the block chance, the health, the attunement, the spell damage. You probably want crit instead of spell damage, but that's pretty much it. The belt, this is pretty much perfect. You could probably swap out the mana regen for fire damage, but you do want a little bit of mana regen so that when you kind of mess up with your echoes, you at least get a little bit of mana regen, so you're not always reliant on smite. So that's like pretty much there. And for the gloves, I'm running cast speed gloves. So this build, I noticed if you have less than like 40% cast speed, it takes forever to actually cast Abyssal Echoes as the animation is very long. So you definitely want cast speed. You really want cast speed. Also, cast speed directly makes your smite better, as you can't just get all of your cast speed from devotion, can you? Right? That's pretty much it for that. You want as much cast speed as possible, like I said. The boots is perfect. We just need another HP roll or crit avoidance. Then, of course, for the solar commandment, this is the perfect base for us, as the fire damage helps us and the healing effectiveness help us. Cast speed, then you probably want either critical strike multiplier or spell crit chance, either way. And of course, double resistance. My gear is pretty shit. In the planner, there will be a finished planner, as you can tell. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the build today. It was more of a like an experimentation. I really enjoyed this. I think the Void version is going to be even more nuts, but we'll get into that when I play that version, as I have a lot of other Void Knights on the list as well. With that being said, thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you're at, and bye.